Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Green, Associate Curator of Special Collections, Archives, and Research here at Philbrook, or virtually from Philbrook. And while we are adjusting to social distancing and being safer at home, we are reaching out to some of our collectors who are with our special exhibition, Tulsa Treasures, which has been this amazing opportunity to see the artwork and the collections that are in our community. And through this exhibition, I have gotten to know the amazing Karen Whitecotton and David Davis, and I wanted them to be able to share some of their collection with us. And so introduce yourselves.
Thanks for having us. My name is David Davis, and I work for the OK Pop Museum that we're building in downtown Tulsa, just across from Cain's. So I've been working for the Oklahoma Historical Society, which is the state agency that owns OK Pop and is developing that museum. I've been working with them for about a year now, and have worked with them for a lot of years before that. And Karen and I both work for OK Pop, so we're married and we live here in Tulsa now, and we're really happy to be here. And thanks for the opportunity to talk to you.
Absolutely.
I'm Karen Whitecotton. I'm the Director of Collections for OK Pop. And as David said, we've both been in the museum industry a really long time, over 20 years, I think, for both of us now. And so this is a really, it's been a really interesting experience for us being on the lending side.
That's
Absolutely.
Yeah, you've switched
Yeah.
roles, haven't you? We have, as we were going around and visiting collections and collectors, one of the groups that we visited was OK Pop, and talking about the collections that OK Pop was going to be able to have in the Tulsa community right across from Cain's, and how excited we were. But as we started talking more to Karen and David, we realized the depth of their personal collections. And so we just couldn't pass it up, and we asked them if they would mind being lenders. And by the way, they get like the stars in their crowns for being the best, most organized lenders. They had condition reports and lists, and it was so spectacular. And because actually we borrowed a large number of objects from you guys, they just were really small. So I want to share with you all images of our special exhibition, and we're going to switch over here. So this is the inside of our special exhibition, Tulsa Treasures, one section, and it's preserving the past. So looking at things that we've loved, either from our history in our community, like Art Deco, how important Art Deco is in the Tulsa community, but then also things that are important to our personal past. So we have this great toy cabinet display wall that includes toys from a whole variety of dates, genres, from really across the world. And Karen and David loaned, I think, five of these little cubicles are all from Karen and David. And so just so we can look at a few of them, they loaned these spectacular Star Wars toys, all original to their era when the Star Wars movies came out. And so tell us a little bit about these Star Wars figures.
Yeah, so Star Wars has always been my personal passion, and so a lot of what you see here, most of the figures in the upper portion were mine as a kid, which I inherited from my brother and an older cousin. The Ewok Village portions we collected, David and I collected a couple years ago. The AT-AT armored vehicle that you see has a wonderful story. We found that a couple of years ago in Gettysburg in a little record shop, I think, and it was so cheap, and so we couldn't turn it down. That was like one of the things we both wanted and never got, and so I had to try to figure out how to get it home. And so I took out like everything out of our one checked bag and put that in the suitcase and tried to get it home, and it got home fine. But that was a fun story. But
and the power of collecting your passion is that, so we're both historians, we're both museum people. We were there in Gettysburg, a historic site, right, to visit the museum. We had been doing some work in Pittsburgh, and so I had it in my head that I'm going to buy something really cool at an antique shop in Gettysburg that had to do with the Civil War, and it's going to be great.
Right.
But and I didn't have we didn't have time. We only had part of the day there, and not a whole lot of money to spend. And so we hit a couple shops. We go downtown area. We find this store, and there's that AT-AT sitting there on the. And I think the guy sold comics, and he was real nice. And I talked to him about it, and he told me the story that they actually belonged to his brother. Had that, and he had the Millennium Falcon in a box. And so yeah, I did not come home with anything that had to do with the Civil War. I came home with a Star Wars toy, and I'm proud of it.
Absolutely. And the big toys like the AT or the Millennium Falcon were, I mean, you may have one friend who had one of those. I mean, they were like the gold. Yeah. So craving those things as a kid, is that something that, so these Star Wars were important to both of you separately when you were growing up. Is that something that you look for, like the things that you never had, is it you always wanted and craved as a kid?
Yeah, I think so. For me, with Star Wars in particular, I'm interested in anything vintage. So I want, everything. In certain areas like G.I. Joe and other areas like that, David, and even Transformers to a degree, David's very selective about what he gets.
Well, it has to do with, what I'm setting my collection parameters to. So for instance, she mentioned the Transformers, which are, early 80s robot toys that are featured in the exhibit.
Yeah, let's flip through. So here up on the top right image are the Transformers in the exhibition.
Yeah. So I set my parameters to collect only that first line that was marketed by Hasbro. So the Transformers, of course, to get into the long story of it, they started in Japan by a toy company named Takara, and they were marketed only in Japan for a while. Then Takara brought them over to the United States, but they were called different things. And they were, some of the ones that you see there were parts of different lines of these transformable robot toys. But Hasbro bought the rights to all of them and then marketed them all as the one thing called Transformers. But so, to go back to the original thought, my collecting parameter there was, well, I only want to collect that first line, that had to do with my age. And, as a kid, I was into the toys when they first came out. So maybe 1984, when they were first marketed by Hasbro in the United States, as Transformers. And then, so that the very first line, that includes, a certain number of the good guys and bad guys. So I basically found myself first little catalog that came in the boxes. I said, I'm just going to collect those pieces that are in that one little catalog. It's like a one sheet catalog.
Right.
And so that's what I've set. But since then, I've decided, you know what, I'm going to do more. But when you finish that first part, that's what pushing it, and you kind of, okay, you know what, I can get the 986 versions. That's fine. I don't care, So in that picture there is one Transformer that's not a part of that first line, and that's the dinosaur. So the Dinobots came out in 1985. So. And
I just love the Dinobots so much, I had to include it, even though it wasn't but there are so many toys from the 80s. You have to give yourself parameters, right? Because otherwise,
yeah, absolutely.
Everything. Right. But your toys are so beautiful and so spectacular. And your collection, I should say for our visitors, your collection is huge. It includes things from like Cabbage Patch Kids to Star Wars to G.I. Joe. And it was so hard to pick just a very few number of objects. And this is just a small segment of each of the Transformers, She-Ra and He-Man. And so it was so hard to just pick a few to show off. And I wondered if you might show us some of objects that we didn't pick. So I'm going to switch over to the big screen. So what else could you show us?
You can go first.
Okay. So I have a couple of things. The first thing that I want to show you, so Clash of the Titans is one of my favorite movies as a kid. And so I pulled this out yesterday as we're unpacking stuff, and this was mine. So this was original to me as a kid. It's 1981. So it's got some damage on the spine from.
It was loved. It was loved.
It was, and it's got, so it's like, it's, you know, the graphics are beautiful, and it's got.
Was it a comic book? Oh,
yeah, that's in the form of a comic. But anyways, it's beautiful and well loved, and so that's one of my favorite things that I have. And I couldn't find it until yesterday.
Oh, look at
still unpacking. But yeah, so that's very important to me.
And you said that you loved movie monsters too, right? So Clash of the Titans has some of the most fantastic movie monsters.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of Ray Harryhausen's work, and so I love claymation, stop motion animation, and this was really late. Clash of the Titans was later in his career, but just the detail in the pieces, and I think that's really why I went on to really like movies like The Dark Crystal and things like that Jim Henson worked on, and even Star Wars, you know, with the puppets. Before they got into computer animation, it was real stuff, you know, it was puppets, and there was just this great physical, you know, 3D nature to it. And but yeah, I love movie monsters. So I have a couple here to show you, and everybody knows, you know, this is a little Wampa from Empire Strikes Back, which is my other favorite movie. I got that on the same birthday, my second birthday, as Miss Piggy. These were my babies, my little baby dolls. So, and I was saying earlier, like, this is me in a nutshell. So,
Miss Piggy and the Wampa, and you got that when you were 2.
Yeah,
that is amazing.
So, yeah, so movie monsters, I mean, it's really into the later 80s, like things like Aliens and Predator and movies like that are still my favorite movies. But it's all monster movies. Not horror movies, but monster movies.
So, David, you separately are a collector. So what keeps you going? What do you keep looking for and wanting to find?
Well, for me, it's all about nostalgia. And, you know, so it's great that we are both working for a pop culture, you know, new institution, because we embrace the fire, and you know, I grew up just buried in it, and so Saturday morning cartoons that made me want to buy the toys and the cereal, and so that's what really spurs me on is trying to remember what I used to have. And like I mentioned before, you know, when we were talking about the AT-AT was, you know, those things that I couldn't have and that I always wanted, you know, so those are some of the things that keep me going, is, you know, and of course there's always the drive I want to finish the collection. Right. So, you know, that I have that one sheet catalog that has everything from 1984, you know, made by Hasbro Transformers. I'm going to buy every one of them and make sure that every one of them has all their little parts.
Which is funny to talk about the little catalog, because when with the die-cast pieces, the Star Wars die-cast pieces that we loaned you, the Hoth series, you know, I gave you the little catalog, the original vintage catalog, so you guys could see how to like lay them out if you wanted to display them that way.
And we did. We that's how we referenced the display. So yeah, the ephemera really speaks to something completely that's so much deeper than just the toys. Yes, and the fact that you have such a huge ephemera collection is fantastic as well. So David, what else did you have to show us?
Oh gosh, I have so many things. So one that I might be able to bring in is a giant Godzilla. So this is a 1977 Godzilla. He breathes fire, and you notice that he's only one-handed, so he has a shooting fist that I'm missing, unfortunately, and that's part of the collecting. You know, you got to get all the little pieces too, and so sometimes it's more fun to get one that's incomplete and needs a little love, because then it makes the fun of collecting last a little bit longer. So the unfortunate part about that is that this fist is very hard to find, and when you do find it, it's expensive. But he will have a fist one of these days, and I'm looking forward to that time. So this is 1977, and that, you know, I would have been 3 years old when this came out. However, I remember having this as a kid, and I remember holding on to my original version of this and watching the Godzilla cartoon on Saturday mornings. Yeah. And so I was a huge Godzilla fan. Wow. The one thing that I always asked for, and I never saw, I'm not even sure if it exists yet, or existed then, but the original cartoon had Godzilla, but he had a little miniature sidekick named Godzuki. And I never saw a Godzuki toy, but when I was a kid, I wanted one and asked for one every year, and I never got a Godzuki.
Okay, that's something else we'll have to find.
Okay, so we talked about ephemera a little bit, and
the Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay, so we don't always collect toys. You know, sometimes it's just anything that was very nostalgic to us, especially in the 80s. So this is one thing that I'm really proud of, and this is the 1983 box set of Dungeons and Dragons. You know, so Dungeons and Dragons is making a really cool resurgence.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, part of it I think may be because of Netflix, you know, and Stranger Things.
Yeah.
You know, so most people, I'm sure, have been to Barnes and Noble and have seen the Stranger Things version, the remake of this box set that actually comes with a Demogorgon figure inside in a window, which is super cool. So, you know, we have things like this, and another really nostalgic part is when you open it up and you look at the old dice. You know,
yeah,
they're not quite as nice as the dice that you find now, the sets. But yeah, really beautiful. It has all the books, the rule books, with all the math that's involved in playing Dungeons and Dragons. Exactly. But so yeah, we collect a lot of different ephemera. Going back to Star Wars, you want to show them this?
Yeah, so this is a pop-up book, a vintage pop-up book, and let's see if I can do this. And I'm gonna show you like the 3D, and it's an immaculate shape. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah, the paper engineering that's going into that.
We have one.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Oh, look at the color. Look at the color.
This is an X-Wing, not a TIE fighter.
That's gorgeous.
And it's beautiful, and it's in great shape.
And so we have the Empire Strikes Back version as well.
We don't have the Return of the Jedi.
So that's one on the list.
Yeah.
Oh.
The Tauntaun.
The Tauntaun.
Tauntaun.
I mean, these books are really works of art of themselves.
Sorry.
It's perfect. It's perfect. So one of the things that I just by visiting with you guys and meeting you is the fun that you get out of your collection.
Yeah.
And so I thought I was channeling you all when I was installing all of the objects. There was some pew pew and I mean, when you're installing, you have to play with it, and that's one of the things.
Yeah. I mean, even though we're museum people, and I especially work with collections, and you know, I know all the rules for museum collection care. But with our own stuff, I mean, we don't handle it. I mean, we handle it, you know, obviously carefully, but there's no gloves at our house. You know, I mean, we touch everything. You know, like when we had you over, I'm like, oh, here, Susan, just touch it. You know, I mean, it's and we don't collect box things either, because to us, it's the connection, it's the physical connection of holding something and being able to, I mean, we don't play with it, but I mean, being able just to hold it versus it being in a box and kind of, you know, that's more like off limits and more, you know, it's like we don't want the extra cardboard. We want, you know, to see the stuff.
Yeah, I think that speaks really loudly about you guys and your how open you are about collected and big-hearted you are about sharing your collection, and the fact that you can see the enjoyment that you all get out of the objects. And I hope that when we're able to open up again, that our visitors will be able to get this joy out of the objects as well. And I have certainly gotten a lot of joy out of the objects, and with my gloves on, but playing with them. I mean, it was you just had to. And I really want to thank you all so much for lending to the exhibition and for working with us also as colleagues at OK Pop and Philbrook working together. But it has been such a pleasure getting to know you guys. And thank you for telling us about your collection, and thank you for sharing your collection with us. And we hopefully when we open back up again, we can have something like this, but in person next time.
Oh, no, that'd be great. And we're so honored to be part of it. It's been very special for us, for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've created a lot of exhibits in my career, and to be on the other side and seeing my own things in there is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you both so much. Thank you, and stay safe and stay healthy. And it's at some point we'll welcome you back to Philbrook.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.